the Department of Public Works, as well as the Georgia International Convention Center, the fabulous Georgia International Convention Center, as well as the Gateway Center Arena at College Park. This is a ancillary budget workshop dialogue to address various matters related to several of the enterprise fund operations in light of current state of affairs relative to economic impacts in that direction. At the behest of both the Office of the City Manager and that of the Director of Finance and Accounting, was offered that we proceed with a follow-up budget workshop meeting so that we can revisit revenue and expenditure forecasts associated with the aforementioned enterprise fund operations. More specifically, the electric line section of College Park Power, the water, sewer, sanitation, and stormwater sections of the Department of Public Works, the fabulous Georgia National Convention Center, and the Gateway Center Arena at College Park. So with that, the documentation per the recommendation or suggestion of Councilman Clay does include a breakdown to offline initial recommendations before aforementioned economic impacts to reflect revised budget adjustments in terms of revenue and expenditure forecasts. So this evening's dialogue is to simply give us an opportunity to review downward adjustments along those lines. And if we are productive this evening, this should conclude the series of budget workshop meeting exercises. With that, ladies and gentlemen, first for the evening is the electric line section of College Park Power. Hugh Richardson is in position to help address any questions or concerns or observations you might have. Likewise, we are in position to entertain accordingly.
Yeah, well, Terrence, if we want to start with questions, I had a couple on the what would be page 2 of the overall document.
Sure.
You, with regard to sales to commercial customers and the convention center, have we made an emphasis, and this is, I guess, partly for convention, Mercedes and Jason, have we made any attempt to conserve power when we're not using the building, in zoning off parts of it that are not under use? I mean, the whole thing is not under use, but I know we're doing some work there and so forth. Is there any way we can do that? And in general, with city buildings, have we been zoning them? Have we been encouraging companies who are using less power, perhaps, to be conserving it? Of course, as long as they're paying their bill, we're happy with that, but some people aren't paying their bill. Can you answer that, you?
Just on a side note, as far as the city accounts, that is just an energy rate only. So if you conserve 10% of your kilowatt hours, your bills will go down 10%. So it's directly related. There's no fixed charges in there. So yeah, the number I put in there was not a big reduction based on energy, assuming we're going to pick back up. But commercial customers are a little different. They have fixed charges. They have demand charges that will continue even if their usage goes down to zero, if they stay active. So it's not a direct equation to if you cut 10%, the bill won't go down 10%. If you cut 10% of their energy use, the bill won't go down 10%. But
well, what I was thinking, I don't know, Mercedes, can you answer that? Have you done anything to cut utilities?
We do. We cut all the lights off when a room is not being used or area is not being used in the convention center. But generally, when we have clients in, they pay for their power. Most of our clients, if they're using any extra power or they need extra wattage, they pay for it through the convention center. Okay,
well, I'm just talking about, let's say during the summer. I know we have some off times during the summer. Can you turn off air conditioning in the ballroom, for example? You can't zone it.
No, we can turn it off, but the problem is if we have an event, it takes so long to cool those rooms off that you're using more power trying to get it cool again after you've had the air conditioner off. So we try to keep it at a comfortable level, but not down so low. If a client requests that we take it lower, we do. But turning it completely off, it would take a long time to cool it back out. So if we have a
Okay.
group coming in, it takes too long to cool that room off for that group.
Understand. What about you, Jason? I know you don't have history at this point much, but is the building designed to be zoned at all? Your mic is muted. Almost said your muke is mited.
Kind of following with what Mercedes said, we have the ability to adjust the zones accordingly. But she's right. I mean, just given the square footage of the building, it would take an enormous amount of energy to cool and heat those areas on any given moment. So to kind of keep them at a constant temperature is a lot easier and probably more cost effective for us.
One thing I was hoping about the design of that building was because we decided to go underground as opposed to building it right on the surface. That should help us with energy conservation. And it'll be really interesting to see what our energy bill is for that facility, considering that a good chunk of it is underground.
Are you talking about the arena?
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. That would be Giannis, but I believe they have the ability to do the same.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. Janos. Is Janos? Yeah, Janos is right above you. At least in my diagram, he is. You might unmute your mic, Janos.
Oh, there you go.
Yes, Councilman Clay, we are able to zone off different areas. As it is right now, we have zoned off all the lower levels. And on the concourse, we have it set at a good temperature for the concourse. At the present time, we got to keep those AC running because of that smoke evacuation that everyone is waiting on. So yes, we do zone it off when there's no one in the building.
And we will be interesting to watch the bill this summer to see how well we do on conservation due to it being largely underground, at least the arena area.
Yes, and that also helped with the climate control also, because by it being underground, we don't get as much humidity there on the floor court. So it helps out a lot, yes.
Okay, good. Well, if we save that power, that means we have more power available to sell on the spot market.
That's correct.
So it can be a real saving provided we can sell it.
That's right. And we have to assume going forward we can.
Yeah. So that's the assumption that's built into your numbers, correct?
Right. Yes, right.
Okay. The other thing I would mention is that customers who are not paying their power bill, even though we haven't cut them off, ultimately we expect the power bill to be paid. And I would suggest that to the extent that they can conserve power, that's going to make their bill less when they do have to pay it. And it will make our bill less because, again, if that energy is freed up, we can sell it on the spot market. That's all I had.
I have a quick question I guess it's for our figure. I just was looking at the revenue that we have coming in on the customer's bills. If they pay that, say like in July or even into August, or say it even goes further, does that revert back to this current year's budget, or do we carry some over to next year's budget? How does that work?
What happens is there is a tier I use as far as anything under 0 to 30 days. I recognize all of that as revenue. Anything 30 to 60 days, I recognize 25% of that as being uncollectible, and anything beyond 60 to 90 days, anything beyond that is basically 100%. We recognize as 100% uncollectible. But when they actually do pay it, it basically gets counted as revenue in the year it was actually collected.
Okay, so it's in the year that it was collected.
Correct.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes, sir.
So if we collect it after July, that'll go on next year's budget.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Well, that might actually be a help for next
Yeah,
year's
I was
budget.
just, you know,
That's exactly right, Councilman Clay. I was about to affirm the same.
oh, yeah, and that's why I was asked, I just,
Well, it's important to note that we've been talking about next year's budget. But if we look at the amount of carry forward across all accounts going into next year's budget, we're using up $1.7 million of our reserve, according to the numbers I've seen. So we're burning reserve right now this year. It's assumed we're burning that much of reserve this year in this budget that we're currently in. So that's going to help things out going forward, I hope.
Yes, sir. And that's the part of the forecast across the board, Councilman Clay. And there have been some individual discussions to reflect that as we get as analytical as we possibly can. So that's affirmative. Are there any other questions regarding the electric line section of College Park Power? Mayor Motley Broom.
She put a question in the chat feature, Terrence.
Okay.
If you want to read it.
It's not showing up on mine.
It says, what is the current demand for energy on the market?
Okay. Hugh, that would be to you, sir.
Yeah, I don't know if I can answer that. All I know is it hasn't changed that I'm aware of, that we can still sell it on the market. Most of our sales, by the way, are going to our other cities in Georgia, waiting for Vogtle 3 and 4 to come online. So they're short. So they need the energy until those units start up in a couple of years. So those are guaranteed sales.
So Hugh, to contribute to the answer, there is an opportunity to sell excess energy, and I think we talked a little bit about that before.
Yes.
So based on that observation, there may be some capabilities for the city of College Park, yes?
Right. Yes.
Okay. Anything further, Mayor Motley Broom? Councilman Gay, do you have any questions of Hugh Richardson or regarding electric line?
No, sir.
Okay, Councilman Taylor, sir?
No, I'm good.
Okay, very well. So unless there's any questions or additional observations regarding the electric line section of College Park Power, I'd like to excuse Hugh Richardson for the evening.
Have an easel ready.
Well, some other time.
Okay.
Yes, there was a lot of behind the scenes discussion to address a lot of the analytical concerns, and here we are. So I think we're all set. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to excuse Hugh Richardson for the evening. Have a good night, Hugh.
Okay.
thank you, Hugh.
Okay.
Thanks, Lou.
Next are the 3 sections of the Department of Public Works. Of course, the Department of Public Works is more than 3 sections. However, the 3 sections to be addressed this evening, water, sewer, sanitation, and stormwater, are all enterprise fund based. Buildings and grounds, some of the other sections are much smaller operations, and they are principally general fund driven, and we've addressed that thus far. So again, considering the fact that water, sewer, sanitation, and stormwater are all enterprise fund operations, we offer special time and attention to make reductions on the revenue and expenditure forecast in that regard as well. So with that, I'd like to start with water and sewer. Specific questions regarding water and sewer.
I asked Mike a question on this, and earlier today I gave him a heads up and he responded to it. And my question was, are we assuming lower revenue in these areas because of less usage or due to failure of people to pay their utility bill, which is partly the water bill? And Mike, I believe you said it was a combination of both. You want to comment on that, please?
Yes, sir. That's what we're looking at. We kind of projecting early, especially with our commercials and our hotels, that their water use has gone down. So on the commercial side, especially where we're looking at a loss of usage or less usage, in other words. On the other question that you had as far as failure to pay, that's that's something else that we kind of factored into. And hopefully that would change after the first quarter of the next fiscal budget, or the next fiscal year, in other words, budget.
Yeah, well, at least with water, we know we don't have to sell excess water on the spot market because we pay for it as we get it. So unlike electricity, if people are using less water, we have less to pay for. So I presume that not only have you reduced the revenue, but you've also reduced the water expense equally.
Yes, sir. That's in our water purchases, and also on the sewer side as well, because
Right.
it'd be less treatment of sewage. Yes, sir.
Okay. That's all I had.
Any other questions or observations regarding water and sewer?
I had commercial sewer. Y'all went up on that amount?
Not on commercial sewer, no, sir.
What
There were no increase.
sales of commercial sewer, 2,100,000, now it's going to 2,200? Revised budget?
Yeah, I think I may have noticed the same thing, Ken.
I
of
don't
it.
know.
The initial recommendation was on sales to
No.
commercial, it was initially 3.7 million, it's now down to 3.13 million.
I think they're looking at 34, 42, 22.
Yes, 4222.
Sales to commercial sewer, that,
That may be a typo, to be honest with you. Looking at that.
yeah, that's a good
I-
question. Well, the amended budget is 3.1, the actual 1.9, so we'll hit a little bit linearly. It'll be an excess of 2.1. So Thea, we'll need your help in that regard. Right now, it's looking at a recommendation of 2.2. My recommendation is 2.1.
It's gone up 100,000.
Yep.
Yeah, I had highlighted that, but I didn't mark a question on it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a typo.
No, that's not a typo.
I don't think so either. No.
Because the numbers were pretty high in some categories, but we looked at the 2019 actual and tried to basically base it on those numbers. If you look at 2019, the 422 was 2.6 million. So we have it at $400,000 less.
Right. So the recommendation is 2.2. That's correct, ladies and gentlemen. So Thea, you, me, and Clichette, we visited about a week ago,
Yes.
running that analysis specifically. And initially we contemplated slightly, but we did take a look at the 2019 actual,
Wish I
which
was
came in at a little over 2.6 million. So that's still a reduction. It's just a little bit larger of a reduction.
And the amended was at 3.1 and we took it down to 2.2. That's not
So we think,
$100,000, yeah.
yes, we believe 2.2 to be a very conservative forecast based on that.
Well, I wasn't aware of that, so, okay.
Yeah, Mike, you turned in something totally different. We
Yeah.
updated that.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah,
Oh,
that
you
was
were
on
not,
us.
Mike.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
was
Mike,
on
I'm
us.
sorry I didn't flag that.
No, that was on us though. We updated that after he submitted his information. We did.
That's correct. So we visited about that a few days back, and that's the
Correct.
recommendation.
Yes, it was.
Yes. I'm sorry, Councilman Allen, did you have something further, sir?
No, that just jumped out at me and I thought I would ask the question.
No, I
Yeah,
appreciate it.
Good catch, Ken.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to clarify. Councilman Gay, did you have anything further, sir, for water sewer?
No, I'll let you know when I have a question.
Of course, just being courteous. Councilman Taylor, sir?
No, I'm fine.
Very well. Mayor Motley Brown, ma'am. Okay. At this time, I'd like to have us to take a look at the sanitation section of the Department of Public Works. Any questions or observations?
Yeah, I have one. In what line item are sales to apartment complexes? We've got residential and commercial. Are they counted as commercial?
No, sir, then counted in residential.
They're counted in residential.
Yes, sir.
So if we have apartment complexes that are not paying their utility bills, then that would be reflected in that line item under residential. You did say residential, right? They're
Yes, sir.
counted as
That is
residential.
correct. Yes, sir.
And so my question is, I know we have some apartment buildings that aren't paying their utilities by some significant amounts. If we were to cut them off, that would mean that the cost associated with buying that water would go away as well.
You mean cutting them off water and power?
Yeah, well,
Yes, sir.
I'm just talking about water right now, but yes.
Okay.
That's a very serious thing for an apartment complex because essentially you have to abandon the apartment complex. You can't exist without water.
That's correct.
Okay, and there were, under the operating transfers line on that same page, line 61, 1000 and 52, 65, 90, those don't match the word worksheets. That was a note I put on here. I think I gave you a heads up on that one. I don't know whether you had a chance to look at it or not.
Yeah,
I believe that number was adjusted in accounting, but I know Thea and I didn't have opportunity to speak about that. Were you talking about operating transfer out of sanitation to the general fund?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
The operating transfer to the general fund, to the general fund, we reduced that number, right? We took it all the way out, correct?
Yes, he zeroed it out. That's correct.
Yes, that's because we're anticipating a loss for the next fiscal year, and they don't have the fund balance to cover that. So I had to basically reduce that to zero because they don't have enough funding to.
Okay, you're saying the enterprise fund couldn't make ends meet, so it couldn't afford any money to be transferred out to general fund?
Yes, sir.
Thank
And
you.
it doesn't have the fund balance to cover it.
Right, understand. That's all I had on that page.
well,
I
that
got some
number
more.
there, 66,448. For operating transfers, you had that was city manager recommendation. And then, when I'm looking at, your summary page, you're talking about 69,571.
Sounds like they're both wrong.
I don't know. Is that 66,488? It's coming off, so it's not a big, but I just was
That's what I
wondering-
mean. They're both wrong there because it should be, apparently it should be zero, she's saying.
Hold on, let me look at.
Yeah, let's take a look at the calculation.
Well, the city manager recommendation went to zero, so that's where it's going to be zero. And the other one, as you said, as well.
Yep. So that needs to simply be noted, Thea, based on my observation.
Okay.
It is zero for the reason we just explained.
Right. Okay.
So Thea,
No, it was zero, but when we brought it before you all, it was on the council at 69. It was 69,000. So what you're looking at as far as the city manager recommended, that wasn't the actual number. It was actually 69,571 when we initially.
Right,
If you
that's
look
what I
back
was
at your, if you look back at your previous prior report, the first report we provided, it should have shown 69,571.
Okay, that takes care of that number. Okay.
I had one on the next page, which is right near the top, line 34, 43, 40, other city sales. That I assume, I asked the question, what is in that line item? But I assume it's the rest of the city buildings. And I'm wondering, why would it go down? Does that mean we're going to have less city building operating and require less water? How are we conserving that water?
Well, that's sanitation, Councilman Clay.
Yes.
It's on the next page. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
If we're on page 29, the mayor has a question as well regarding landfill dump fee charges. The question is, are we experiencing an increase in residential trash? I understand we have a decrease in commercial. Are they balancing out, or has there been an overall decrease? And that's line item 526120.
There has been an increase in residential. Of course, we all know why that is, with people sheltering at home. There has been a decrease in commercial due to less people staying in hotels during this time. So yeah, that's something that we try to come up with to balance that out on both sides of commercial and residential sales.
I have a question, Terrence.
Councilman Gay.
Under, back to Councilman Clay's question, I have two questions. What are some examples of other city sales with sanitation? And to his point, how is that being reduced? And the second question is, as a city, are we looking at renewable energy as opposed to paying landfill fees? Selling it to renewable energy as opposed to paying them to dump it?
Well, I can answer that last one, is that at this present time, no. We have not looked into that. And that's something, as what you're saying, Councilman Gay, that we can look into and see if there's a way to do that. Right now, I don't believe it is, but we can look into it.
I know the city of Stonecrest is looking at offsetting their fee by, there's a renewable energy program that's taking so you can look more into it. That's all. Just
Yes, sir. The other part, as far as other sales to cities, I'll yield to Thea to speak on that, because that was a number that my department did not enter on that one. That's other sales, other city sales. I believe,
Sorry, Mike, we didn't
accounting
enter that
adjusted it.
number. We didn't enter that number.
That was the number that came from the Department of Public Works to the Department of Finance and Accounting. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. It came from Public Works. We didn't enter that number.
No.
We can discuss that, but we didn't enter it.
That's interesting.
We don't have the ability to know what other city facilities are doing, or what billing, how they being billed.
It looks like
That's the
the
reason why
Department
we
of Public
couldn't. I'm sorry, go ahead, Terrence.
It looks like the Department of Public Works made a calculation based on previous experiences to that effect in general.
is it a true number? I mean, is it like, what is it could be like? Like what type of, we talking about sanitation, like be more specific.
I will look up to see other city sales, but it seems like it's it's basically, they basically picked up the actual numbers from 2019. They just estimated that number. It wasn't based on any particular actual quantity. It was based on an estimate of what was previously collected.
That's correct. It was a calculation based on that direction, and it's on a downward trend based on direction to reduce revenues. So
yeah, but that makes no sense.
Huh? Sorry?
That makes no sense, just to reduce revenues. How are you going to reduce trash?
the other city sales line item, 344340 is what we're speaking about, correct?
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So the 2019 actual, $54,284.26. The budget for the current fiscal year was a little bit less than that, $50,000. The actual forecast, $71,605. The initial recommendation was to keep it flat based on what happened in 2019. So based on the recommendation to keep it flat and our efforts to be fiscally conservative in terms of revenue forecasts, a calculation to go 38,185 was offered. Quite frankly, there may be merit to increase that other city sales outcome number a little bit higher than 38,185. It's extremely conservative based on previous trends.
On the other hand, that's selling things to ourselves, right?
Correct.
Correct.
Okay, so if we say we've cut that revenue too much because we're still going to be picking up the same amount of trash from the fire department, let's say, that means the fire department is going to have to pay for that. So we're going to show revenue here, but we're going to show more expense there. Now, assuming that it was balanced out when the budget was put together, that what the fire department pays is what the revenue shows up in that $38,000, then we're fine. But if the fire department is assuming they're paying less, then we're just fooling ourselves.
There is a general thought or assumption that they will pay less in terms of day-to-day operations, Councilman Clay. And that is to be reflected as we engage operations when we kick off the new fiscal year. So,
well,
politically,
all right.
personally, I like the fact that it is a low number, but it may be, quite frankly, a little bit higher than the 38,185. But for purposes of conservative budgeting practices, I think it works for now.
I think it'll probably be a little bit higher, but I'm fine with it.
Yeah, I think it'll be a little bit higher too, but again, it's a bit of a moving target. But if I were a betting man, but although I'm not, I'm looking at the 40s at least.
Yeah.
I'm fine with that.
Very well.
Yeah.
Any other questions or observations concerning the sanitation section of the Department of Public Works?
Yes.
Please.
On page 3, which is 32 in the document, capital lease interest is shown as 0. The capital lease principal is shown as 35,322. And I guess I'm confused. If we have a capital lease principal and it doesn't go away, why would the capital lease interest go away?
I know that was recently booked. Adjustment was made due to the purchase of our new boom truck. So we were, I just don't think that the interest is probably included in the 35,322.
That's
And it
correct.
just wasn't broken out.
That's correct.
Okay, I'm
Okay, that's
glad to
good.
hear you say that.
Yeah. Glad to see the truck out there.
Yes, sir.
That's all I had there.
Any other questions or observations concerning the sanitation section of the Department of Public Works, specifically the sanitation fund, enterprise fund?
I don't have any.
Okay, Councilman Taylor, you okay, sir? Mayor Molly Broom? Okay, very
Thank
well.
you.
Next, the final enterprise fund operation is the Stormwater Utility Fund, the smallest operation of all the sections in the Department of Public Works. Any questions or observations?
Yeah, I have. It's obviously trivial because we only have 7,500 we're talking about. But why would the stormwater cost to the convention center go up? The 2020 actual amount was, well, I'll take that back. I'll take the question back because the 2020 actual amount was about 63.
Yeah, 73.
So the actual amended budget was 70, and last year was 76, and it's gone up. It's about 70, about the same. Never mind. Sorry about that.
I've got a question about the 54,770 improvements to stormwater, and we took a couple out. That's not going to cause us a problem later on, is it, Mr. Mason?
No, that was just a couple of projects that we were looking at that we're just going to delay, like we talked about at the previous budget session.
That's not gonna
Just
come
gonna
back and
delay
bite
some
us or
things.
anything like that. Okay,
No, sir.
thank you.
Any other questions or observations concerning the Stormwater Utility Fund? If not, that concludes the 3 enterprise funds involving the Department of Public Works. Likewise, I would like to excuse Mike Mason for the evening.
Thank you, Terrence.
Thank you very
Thanks,
much,
Mike.
Mr. Mason.
Thank you. Everyone have a good night. Thank you.
All right, Mike, we'll catch you tomorrow.
Yes, sir.
Your
Right.
people are doing a good job.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
What remains at this time are both the Convention Center Fund and the Gateway Center Arena at College Park Fund. So again, this is definitely an associated moving target. We did forecast based on what is anticipated to occur the first quarter of the new fiscal year. Typically, the first quarter of every fiscal year involving the Georgia National Convention Center is a downtime, so to speak. And we are likewise hopeful that we will experience a more positive trend. But this is definitely a fund that we will constantly have to monitor. It's probably the greatest moving target of them all. Both the Georgia National Convention Center and the Gateway Center Arena at College Park funds. So,
Yeah.
And then again, I think Councilman Clay, you and I've had a discussion or two about that, definitely in finance and accounting. This is a constant monitoring exercise, but based on intelligence, forecasts, econometrics we've been able to assemble thus far, the recommendations as outlined are where we are, and there are downward trajectory. That's the downward trajectory in terms of revenue and expenditure forecasts. With that, that's a general introduction to advise the public and yourselves that we were especially conscious in this regard. Nevertheless, we are prepared to address any specific questions, concerns, observations you may have as always. Please.
I just have an observation. Go ahead, sir. I had
Go ahead.
My observation was on the salaries and part-time salaries. It doesn't decrease in the same percentage as the revenue. Do you need, I don't know how to say it, but it's not decreasing in the same way that the revenue is increasing. I'm trying to think of the word. What do you call it? Are you sure that they are decreasing, Terrence? It's like you got the part-time and your salaries are not, especially part-time and overtime, they're not decreasing as much as your revenue is. So why do you need those many part-time and overtime employees?
The expenses in terms of salary, operating salary, overtime, and salary part-time are actually decreased from 2019 and 2020. So I would not, revenue forecasts and expenditure forecasts are mutually exclusive events. I would therefore ask you to focus on the expense side exclusively. So for example, on par with the salary overtime or the salary part-time, we're recommending $150,000. What was initially contemplated was $250,000. And the amended budget is nearly $100,000 more than what we're recommending for 2020, 2021. So I think that's pretty square.
Yeah, I have a general comment and some smaller ones. I had reviewed the convention center and the arena pretty thoroughly and gave all my comments to Mercedes prior to us deciding that we were going to push it off to this meeting. And she has made changes that reflected probably most, if not all, of my comments. So in general, I'm a happy camper. There are one or two things that I would like to mention if it's appropriate to go to page 2 of 5. Mercedes, at one time you had a new position in here and you cut back on that. And I believe that was an IT position, if I remember rightly.
What, the
And,
arena?
I'm sorry, no, this was for the convention center. And it's on page 2. It's new personnel
Oh,
costs,
okay.
position consideration. And I think that was an IT person, but I see you still have 3,000 in there, and that sure sounds like an intern.
Actually, it's a reclassification. We have a young man that came from the operations department, and he's been working in the IT department for about 2.5 years. So he's the one that pulls the wire. He's been trained to do it. So we were going to reclassify him and add money to his for what he does.
Okay, so that just reflects the increase. Okay.
Yes.
And on page 3, which is page 53 of the document, security services. You have an actual amount for this year of 294,000, and I presume that was through March 31st. And you're putting in for next year of 345,000, and that strikes me as being high considering the situation that we're in. So my question would be, maybe you need more security even if this facility is empty. I don't know, but that just doesn't sound right.
Well, we had a 1-year contract. We have a contract with All-in-One. So I was going to go back and renegotiate the contract because we don't have as many events as we had before. And we generally had 2, 2, and 2 on each shift. And I think we can cut one person from each shift to get the dollar down to that amount.
So, but that amount is actually bigger than your 2020 actual.
That's because we have not added the rest of the year in.
Yeah. So if you added the rest of the year in, and you're almost at 300,000 at 3/4 of the way through a year, and you added in another quarter, that would bring you up to 400,000. But we know nothing's happening this quarter. So I just, and we know much is going to happen in the first quarter of next fiscal year. It just struck me as a little high. I don't want to make a big issue out of it, but you're comfortable with that number.
Understood, but our security is a contract for the long haul. So it covers the building 24 hours a day. This is not the security that's based on events. Okay.
And the other thing I had on that page was 526560, which was, I'm sorry, 526590, which is contingencies. Your contingency, you had it at 500,000, you cut it to 0. And while I think it's a good idea to cut contingency, that sounded almost like too big a cut. I know I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth, but do you feel good about that number? Because we're trying to avoid surprises later.
No, that number scares me, to be honest, because we never know what will break or what will happen. But again, we were trying to get to a balanced budget with the amount of revenue that we had coming in. But it does scare me. I would feel more comfortable even if we left 100,000 in just for contingency. It would give me a little better comfort level.
I'll ask the council what they want to do. What do you think? I'm not excited about adding 100,000 in, to be honest with you, but I think we're probably fooling ourselves with a 0 in there. I think the mayor might be typing.
There's a couple of things that I had questions about that we've gone down, R&M, VP, R&M buildings, kitchen equipment, other equipment that need to be replaced. I worry if these things going to jump up and all of a sudden when things break loose, then we're going to be looking for more kitchen equipment and stuff like that.
Right.
And we'll be behind the 8 ball. That's my only thought on that. I want to be ready to go because we're going to need to be having people ready to go, have the kitchens ready to go, have everything ready to go when it does break loose. And I hate to spend the money, but that's my thought.
Well, the thing is, I'd rather have it in one place since we don't know what's going to happen and we don't know what might break down where. So if I were going to have contingency, I'd want to have it here in this one line item, and it's zero. So I think you and I are sort of saying the same thing.
I think we are.
The mayor has I'm sorry. The mayor has a comment and 2 questions. The first comment is, I would agree that zero makes me uncomfortable, but some of these projections regarding revenue still feel high as well. And the 2 questions are regarding line item 345100, sales, food, and beverage. For events that were scheduled until the end of the calendar year, what percentage of contracts have we lost so far? And line item 345150, meeting rooms, are we comfortable with less than a 10% decrease from fiscal year 2019?
Okay, what's the first question? That was a lot.
Okay, the sales and food beverage. For events that were scheduled until the end of the calendar year, what percentage of contracts have we lost so far?
So far, we probably lost maybe about 35%. Most of the groups that we lost, they didn't cancel. They just postponed and moved out to a later date.
This year, this coming year?
They'll be in the coming year. The biggest thing that we couldn't recoup was the graduations, but a lot of the breakfasts and a lot of the catering functions that we had, they just moved to another day.
Okay, and the second question was in regards to meeting rooms. Are we comfortable with less than a 10% decrease from fiscal year 2019?
Am I comfortable? No, but if it's something I have to do, it's something I have to do. 2 of our largest groups we lost, we totally lost them, which was Delta and also Chick-fil-A. So they went into Chick-fil-A would go into next year, but Delta we lost, and Delta usually comes in July and January. So I think we lost the July meeting and then it'll move to January. Am I correct, Jane?
Yes, you are correct. Chick-fil-A is totally gone, but Delta is moving, but we still lost one of them.
Another question, as far as the rescheduling, is that this coming fiscal year or calendar year?
A lot of them move within the next fiscal year. The majority of them move to the next fiscal year, except for Chick-fil-A.
I've got a question along that same line. How much more, and it's for this year, the current year, how much more revenue do you see coming in for this current year? Do you see any revenue coming in?
I think we are still getting a lot of inquiries. We actually got an inquiry yesterday about somebody doing arena football for 60 days. So we're still getting inquiries. I think it's all going to depend on when they let large groups meet again. Because right now they have not released it for large groups. So people are calling in and people are holding space. We're just waiting for when can we start holding the large groups.
Okay.
Any other questions or observations concerning the Convention Center Fund?
No, I agree with Councilman Clay. I sure would like to see something in contingencies because
May I offer a recommendation in that regard for review and consideration that we might be able to work? And I hate to do this as well. I mean, I like what we've done in terms of recommendations, but to achieve a comfort level, it doesn't necessarily have to be all the way to $100,000, Mercedes, correct?
Correct.
You're looking for some type of cushion.
Mm-hmm.
Given where we are, what would be a reasonable number? I have a thought in mind in terms of what we can accomplish, but I'd like to hear from you first before I offer a recommendation.
Well, if you don't like $100,000, I like 75.
I like 50.
I figured as much.
50, half.
Uh-huh.
And I think we can strike a balance in that regard relatively safely. And of course, as conditions hopefully improve after the second quarter, at the beginning of the second quarter or so, then we can look at making adjustments at that time. But I think 50 is very, very reasonable. There's an element of fiscal conservatism, yet it alleviates concerns about having something there. So ladies and gentlemen, my recommendation would be a $50,000 contingency. I think we can strike a balance and make that work, not a dollar more.
The mayor has a question, Terrence.
Ma'am?
Would that come from additional transfers in?
Basically, how are we gonna balance the budget once we increase it by 50,000?
Yes.
How are we?
Calculating in my head. Thea, you and I need to do calculations to answer that question, but
Calculations how? Is either we're gonna have to reduce somewhere else or increase artificially?
I'm looking at the latter to answer the question, Thea. So help me with that. I think that's the only way we can do it at this point.
Mercedes would have to tell me where she can pull $50,000 from. Well, you saying the latter as far as increasing?
Just a second.
Okay, may I give a quick word?
Go ahead.
In the line item for capital, we have the Delphi diagram and we have the carpet installation. Well, that's why Michael Hicks is on the line. In the Delphi diagram, we went back to the customer to get an exact price. So what we estimated the price at was about $98,000. What the price actually is about $30,000. So Michael Hicks is on the line to discuss the fiber installation. So if we balance this off, this may solve some of the problem. Because what we were gonna put that money back into was for the HVAC system.
For the what?
Instead,
For
we
the rebuilding of the HVAC system. We have two systems and they both need to be rebuilt. So we left enough in there to get one rebuilt. So that's kind of where we pulled it from.
So on that
Okay,
note,
so
Mercedes,
what does that have to do with fiber?
It has nothing to do with fiber. Michael Hicks wants to talk about putting fiber because he wants to talk about fiber going into the arena. And there's a cost with that. So I told him he had to come and speak on behalf of the cost.
Okay.
meanwhile, Mercedes, as far as the $50,000 contingency, the opportunity you just talked about, we can take that from there, can we not? To answer the question.
It depends on the fiber issue.
Well, let's talk, well, again, I think we're pretty conservative there. So you just talked about math from $98,000 to $30,000, correct?
Mhm.
The difference between those numbers is $68,000. So can we do work with $18,000 and leave the net 50 for the contingency piece?
You have to talk to Michael
can we
Hicks.
make that work somehow?
No, Terrence and Mayor and Council, that fiber is already connected in the arena. That's what they use all season long for the Hawks games and concerts. That fiber is working. So we have to pay for that. I got the latest invoice and it went down. They originally charged us $6,000 a month. I talked to them and got it down to $2,000 a month. So they got to pay $24,000 over 12 months for that fiber to the arena. The fiber is already installed.
Okay,
so you're saying it's a usage charge as opposed to an additional.
Yes.
Yeah, because I was under the impression that fiber was in there to add something, and you're saying it's already there, and that's the cost of keeping it up.
Yes.
Well, then I don't see how we can cut that.
And if I may, ladies and gentlemen, please, I'm on a roll.
I have.
May I please, just to do the math. So the $68,000 net outcome you talked about a little while ago, Mercedes, yes? From 98,000 to 30,000, correct? It's an outcome of the $68,000, correct? Please shake your head, yes? Okay, so can we take from that $68,000 net outcome, the $24,000 that Michael just talked about, leaving $44,000 to go towards the contingency, and we will simply find $6,000 elsewhere? Can we proceed that way?
Yes.
Okay,
Say yes.
so that's how we get it. I had to keep us in that place, ladies and gentlemen, on the math.
Yes.
So we got 44,000. You have your $34,000 based on the commentary you offered early on, Mercedes. So everybody says yes to that. Michael, you said yes. Mercedes, you said yes. Thea, that's where we come up with. So we simply need to come up with another $6,000, and we'll simply just play with that. We don't have to do that right this moment, but it's only $6,000 left to build a $50,000 contingency. Very well, ladies and gentlemen, consensus?
One question, Terrence. Giannis, are you okay?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, Michael, that's it.
I'm okay with that. I think we need to put a note in there that, you know, should things break loose a little bit better than we thought, we take another look at this.
Of course, no question about it. And hopefully we'll be able to build a larger contingency circa second quarter or thereabouts.
I just think we need to be ready to go when it's time to go.
That's right. Any other questions or observations concerning the Convention Center Fund? Councilman Allen, you okay?
I'm okay.
Councilman Gay, you okay?
Yes.
Councilman Taylor, you okay, sir? Councilman Clay?
I'm good.
Mayor Motley Broom? Thank you. Mercedes, good work on helping us to establish a contingency outcome as well as satisfying the fiber fee. Good work. Now, the Gateway Center Arena at College Park is a distinct enterprise fund, although it is technically an extension of the fabulous Georgia National Convention Center for financing purposes and the covenants that were achieved when the project was implemented. It includes direction to establish it as its own enterprise fund, and that's why it's separate in that regard. With that, we are in position to address any specific questions or concerns you all might have.
I'm happy that you guys took the personnel cuts that I pointed out earlier, and
Yes, sir.
that makes sense.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Terrence, I have a question. It's not related to a actual line item, but I just have a question. When we did the arena study before we built it, correct?
Correct.
Do you recall what was the critical risk and assumption before we even knew about COVID? What that mean, in other words, what did the study reveal could be the worst case scenario to lower our revenue?
And quite frankly, what I do recall is, of course, it had nothing to do with the pandemic taking shape, but basically the forecast, a number of forecasts were incorporated into the study in terms of what net thresholds we would have to meet in terms of activities and so forth. So Mercedes, you can probably chime in a little bit as well.
Councilman Gay, one of the biggest factor we had was spending money in marketing and awareness. That's why in this budget, we kind of lent a little more money toward awareness and getting in touch with the radio stations and doing some things with them. So the awareness was our biggest threat.
Okay, very well.
Any others, ladies and gentlemen? Councilman Taylor? Councilman Allen?
No, I just have the same questions, you know, again about, you know, cutting R&M equipment and R&M buildings and things like that. We just need to be ready to go if things break loose, because if the WNBA comes, we don't need to be falling short and say, hey, we don't have this or we don't have that. We need to be ready to respond.
Yes, sir.
And I know Giannis, your people are doing a great job. So
actually, Councilman Allen, Giannis has been working with the WNBA, and a lot of equipment that the Skyhawks use, he is going to be lending the equipment or having them work together so they can use some of the same equipment, since we're not able to purchase the equipment right now. Giannis, you want to speak on that behalf?
Yes, I'm working both with Chris and Janice to see if we can continue to use the Skyhawks equipment for the WNBA. Since we're unable to purchase a lot of our equipment this year, the WNBA requires a little bit more than the Skyhawks, but we're relying on Janice and Steve Cooney to actually loan us some of their equipment from their arena in order for us to operate this year. But we are in talk with Chris to see if they can purchase some of this equipment so they will be able to operate correctly.
Mercedes, do we still have the Fox as a customer for the?
We do. They're our booking agent for concerts, and like the group that we had that came in that did the I guess it was a gaming group. They're our booking agent for that. So the lead that we have for the arena football for 60 days, that was a lead that we had sent for the Fox. So instead of hiring a salesperson, they work on our behalf, taking on that.
Right. I mean, you had told me that when concerts booked the Fox downtown, that Fox was going to use us as a practice. Do we still have that relationship?
We still have the relationship, but right now the Fox is shut down probably until the end of June.
Okay. And one final observation. Have you been contacted for any COVID-19 use for the parking lot or the arena? I went to an event that they were renting out their parking lot. Have you been contacted?
Well, we used the parking lot to do sales for Cisco for a while. We were contacted by FEMA or GEMA. So we gave them the information, and I think they're using one of the buildings for free downtown. And we were also contacted by Amazon to be a distribution place. And again, they found a place out in Clayton County that was a lot less expensive. They basically gave them space for it.
Got it.
So we have been in contact because we have the information for FEMA, and we've been there several times before. We have been in contact with them, and the mayor also sent a letter on our behalf to FEMA so that we can, I think the mayor did and Artie did as well, so that we could service some type of service while they had the pandemic going on.
Yeah, I saw some virtual, I went to an event that was at a large parking lot. The people parked in the parking lot and they put a screen. And I was just wondering, is that any new source of revenue coming out of the pandemic?
It's always a possibility. I don't turn anything.
Actually, it was a graduation, but I didn't want to say too much. I'll give y'all some work to do, okay? I ain't gonna do all the work. I don't get the big dollars like y'all.
Thank you for that lead, though, that idea.
But Mercedes, that's an interesting idea. Could we put in a drive-in theater?
It was a drive-in graduation, actually.
Well, I'm talking about movies now. I'm talking about
let me just
drive-in movie theater.
Actually, the Dallas Cowboys at their old stadium had drive-in, and they had 2 screens, and they would show movies and charge the parking and everything else, and you could get it through your radio and everything. And it just was.
It's not a bad idea, especially the graduations, if we could put up a screen and that way people could see their kids actually. So it's not a bad idea. So we'll look into it.
Absolutely.
I got a question from the mayor regarding line item 345140, meeting rooms. Needing some context as to why we think we'll hit that number.
Well, the meeting room rental includes the rental for the arena. So based on what we charge, that's why we put that revenue in there. Do I think we'll make it? I'm hopeful. It all depends on how soon they let basketball play again and how soon they open large venues. Because at this point, they really haven't opened any large venues. So if they could get the venues open, we can make it happen. But if not, then that number will probably need to be adjusted.
Well, Mercedes, let me ask that question a little bit differently. If is it more likely, do you think, that the revenue projections would be going up or down? In other words, are we at the top end of the reasonable range, or are we in the middle, or we're at the bottom?
As far as our pricing?
No, as far as what we think we're going to get revenue. I mean, do you think it's more likely that revenue will get better than you have in here, or worse than you have in here?
I think it'll get worse before it gets better.
Yeah.
The mayor had another comment as well. She says, but 548,000 of that is room rental, not basketball.
Well, no, we get room rental from basketball. They pay to play in the arena, so they're basically renting the arena, and we charge them per game.
Whether they use the rooms or not.
Right. The meeting room is not for the team rooms. It's just to use the arena, because we can't break the arena up and just give you a meeting room or the arena. If you rent the arena, you rent the arena.
Right. Right.
I think she's typing another comment.
And we also, just for the mayor, we also put our ticket fees in that line item as well. So if we have a game and the game is 4,000 people and we get $1, $2 per ticket sold, that's where that revenue goes as well.
She says there are 3 line items under 345140, basketball facility, concert facility, room rental.
What line item did she say?
345140.
So that must be in the backup.
The basketball facility fees and the concert facility fees are based on the number of ticket sales. It's not the room rental itself. The room rental is totally separate from the facility fees.
So if somebody rents the basketball, say for basketball games, WNBA, does that include the officials' room and the locker rooms? Where do those go?
Yes.
Okay.
It includes all of that.
Yeah. So that's what
it's not like the convention center.
Room rental?
Right. It's not like the convention center where you can rent an exhibit hall or a ballroom. If you rent, because I can't have more than one group in there at a time. So if you rent the arena, you rent the arena.
Okay, the mayor says, okay, I get it. Where do you think the room rental will be generated from at this point?
I think we're gonna have to be creative. Do I think we'll reach that number? I don't know. I think we're gonna have to do some things like when concerts are traveling, if they need a place to practice, try to do some movie sets where they're shooting a movie. So I think we're gonna have to be creative about what we use it for. And not everything we use it for is gonna include an audience.
So you might break up and have a separate room fee if that were to happen.
No, you still can't have a separate room fee.
Okay.
Question, what is the best way we can support that level of creativity?
Advertisement.
Again, it goes back to advertising. Some of my ideas is to go to the radio station, because if there's some radio stations, if they're gonna sell a hot dog, 1 million people are gonna show up, and partner with the radio stations. That way we get our names out there and they get the people there, because we'll make our money once we get them in the door off of drinks and hot dogs, because my hot dogs are going up to $100 per hot dog.
The mayor says, sign me up.
Thank you, Mayor.
Any other questions or observations concerning the Gateway Center Arena at College Park Fund?
I'm finished.
Mayor has one.
Naming rights, how close are we on that?
Before COVID-19, we were very close. We were actually working with some people from the Hawks and also some people from the Dream. After COVID, it's going to depend on how people's money is running. Because right now we only have, I think we have $75,000 a year that we get. So we had grander ideas before COVID-19, but I don't know how free people are going to be with their money.
Any other questions, thoughts, or observations?
All right, well, let me just throw out one idea. What about using the arena as a movie theater?
That's what I wanted to, oh, that's not a bad idea. Never thought about that. We'll have to find out about licensing, but I'll check into it.
Yes.
You could spread people out. Everybody could enjoy. You could sell your hot dogs.
I could sell my $100 hot dogs.
That's where I was going.
That's right.
Terrence, overall, what is the cost savings for these? Like when we did the budget, we did about a 10%. You said you did about a 10% overall. Is there a number that you can say that you further reduced this by for the purpose of this amended budget report?
So roughly speaking, from the comprehensively speaking, I'm thinking about the total of all funds. We came up with roughly an additional 10% aggregate on top of what we previously accomplished. But again, some are more than others. It fluctuates. You have to take a look at each fund. The focus tonight was, of course, the respective enterprise funds, but this is the second round of adjustments downwards. So I think we've done fairly well in that regard, and it is a constant moving target. But yes, those are about.
Okay. Very well.
Well, Terrence, help me understand one thing.
Sure.
On the 24th, I was looking at the overall amount of the budget, which was 136,500 and some 580,000.
Mm-hmm.
And the budget that we're currently looking at is at 126,162,183.
Yes.
Now that's looking at total budget numbers. And since we know that money transferred between funds actually gets counted twice, the actual expense budget, by my calculation, went from 110, went down to 110.2 from about 100 and what was the number? 119.5.
Yes.
So from an expense standpoint, if we would try or just look at money going out the door, that would be my analysis of how much expenses came down. And I'll let Thea join in if she disagrees with that.
I think that's correct, Councilman Clay. They came down tremendously based on the second and third round of work we were able to achieve based on the respective observations. So we were fairly conservative. So Thea, feel free to chime in accordingly, but I think that summarizes it.
She must have dropped off, or her mic is muted. I don't know.
Thea, you there?
Hello?
Yes, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Can you affirm what Clay and I just discussed? I simply stated, I think that's what it comes down to. He calculated the expense figures in that, and I simply affirmed those, and we're simply looking for a follow-up endorsement from you in general.
I would, but I lost you on that one as far as what you were discussing previously.
What I said, Thea, was what you and I were talking about this afternoon, that if you take off the double counting of the transfers between
Yes.
funds and are dealing with effectively money going out the door or revenue coming in the door.
Correct.
We went from about 119.5 million down to about 110.2 million, something like
Yes.
roughly.
Well, it was when you and I initially talked. It was on the initial budget was 136, and it went down to 126, and then we backed up the transfers in and out, and it went down even further.
Right, because they just cloud the numbers a bit, because if you didn't have any transfers between funds, the budget would appear a lot smaller.
Yeah, that's correct.
Can
About almost $16 million smaller.
Correct, right then and there. But let me offer an additional coaching commentary. And I discussed this during the first budget workshop meeting we hosted that took place back on April 1st or April 8th. Ladies and gentlemen, we initially contemplated before the COVID-19 event somewhere in the neighborhood of a $144 million total fund operating budget recommendation. So the very first series of recommendations entailed that dollar amount. So if one were to take a look at it from that standpoint, the reductions are even greater. Because again, we did it in 2 phases. And so my hats off to the department directors working with the Office of the City Manager, Department of Finance and Accounting. This was a painstaking process, but I think there was a lot of excellent work. And what I was hoping to do at this time is to also thank Mayor and City Council for indulging this 6th budget workshop meeting taking place here Wednesday evening, May 6th, to give us an opportunity to fine-tune enterprise fund related recommendations. Because again, we had to offer additional time and analysis to get to the absolute best place possible. And so with that, tonight's session represents the final budget workshop for fiscal year 2020-21 proposed budget. Normally it's 5 sessions. We ended up having 6 because of the current state of affairs. So where do we go from here is the necessary public hearing process for adoption, June 1st, June 15th.
Let me ask a question, and I know I'm going to hear about it, but what would be, if we didn't give any raises this year, how much money would we be saving?
We're not giving any raises this year.
Okay.
That does not exist. That's not happening.
Good. Okay.
So it's not even factored.
All
But
right.
to answer the question based on class and comp opportunities that we previously discussed prior to the COVID-19 event, that was about a $700,000 consideration aggregately. And I also talked about the idea of phasing that into 2, bringing it down to about $350,000. But again, none of that has been budgeted for in an effort to achieve austerity. Where we can.
That's where I was going. Okay.
Yes, sir. Any other thoughts or observations, ladies and gentlemen?
Terrence, I will say that I have my director of sales, I have everybody sending me texts, but we've been here before in the convention center. And the one thing that I do know is graduations, people are going to show up and church groups are going to meet. So everybody will be hitting the pavement and we will bring it back. And I have to thank my team because I couldn't do anything that I do without them.
Yes, ma'am, of course. And we appreciate that. And my hats off to everyone involved.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. It's been a tough job so far, and we're not out of the woods by a long shot, but it's been a good effort. At least people have been buckling down and digging into things, and we may have to do some more digging depending on how things go. But yes. I'll say it again, guys, pay your utility bills.
Yes, sir. Councilman Allen, anything further, sir?
No, we need to get that utility money coming in.
Yes, sir. Councilman Taylor. Very well. Councilman Gay?
I'm fine for now.
Right. Mayor Motley Broom?
Very much, Mercedes.
Any conclusion remarks at all from anyone? Mayor Motley Broom? Okay, I think she said she's okay.
No, she's typing.
Okay, my apologies.
She says, pay your bills. It's her comment.
Good job and buckling down and making cuts, hard cuts and everything else. I know it's tough. And we, again, like Councilman Clay said, we might have to do this again, but I hope not.
Yes.
know, you,
And to
you know,
reiterate that point, we're looking at quarterly exercises to this effect. Normally it would be once or twice a year budget adjustments and that, but we're looking at quarterly. But if the moving target is more rampant than that, we may have to get together monthly or every other month to take a look at where we are. So I reiterate that again.
Terrence, I hate to be.
We'll do what we need to do.
That's what I'm getting at.
Since you all are talking about cuts and what have you, let me make a comment to be the voice of reason. And that, I worked several years to do what's called cost containment. In other words, I worked to help municipalities and county governments find and save money. That's what I did. And my point in saying that is, it's not just making cuts. And it's not just looking for revenue. It's also about containing costs. One of the things, and I know we can deal with this more in a strategic plan, but since we're making comments about cuts, one of the things that we're not doing is that we're not being wise, at least in my opinion, on people who are getting large contracts. I mean, I know we do bidding, but there are things that have prevented us from being competitively priced. Sole source, which we don't do a lot of. Emergency on call, that's just another fancy way of not bidding. And it goes on. And I mean, we might spend $1 million with a contractor, but that the director is given no, our staff is given no direction to even negotiate with those people. They're having financial problems too. If they were going to do a job for $300,000 and we directed our staff to tell them we're only going to give you $2 million like you do in your real life, we could save costs. A tremendous amount of money could be saved in this city. So I just want us to be mindful. It's not just pay your light bill. Treat the larger corporate vendors in the same regard. And one last thing, I just want to let you know that I'm not just rambling. I'm going to give you a specific example. The sewer study. And I did a little research, and I found out that is actually, and I'm not jumping, I just want to talk about saving money, how we need to start thinking about saving money. We paid upwards of $2.5 million before this new mayor and council on that sewer study. It sounds in principle like you want your sewers to not get clogged. That's what you do. That's part of running a city. It sounds right. But when you look at these things more closely, what I'll tell you is that we were done with that study. Those were savings that were left over. We essentially gave a vendor more work. So I guess what I'm just trying to say is we got to charge our professionals to be as frugal with spending our tax dollars as individual customers. And that's what I want to say.
Duly noted, and there's many ways in which we're expecting departments to be efficient in operations in that regard, to also include those types of approaches. So that's part of the package as well, whenever the opportunity can be made available.
Good night.
Unless there's anything further, ladies and gentlemen, Mayor Motley Broom, I'd like to recommend that we adjourn, and from there we'll proceed with the formal authorization process for fiscal year 2020-2021 via both meetings in June, Monday, June 1st and Monday, June 15th.
Good.
Very well.
Mayor says it sounds good.
Okay, very well. On that note, feel free to adjourn, Mayor and City Council, and thank you very much for your time. Thank you for indulging the recommendation for a 6th budget workshop meeting. I think it was time well spent, and we are all more analytical because of it.
Okay, thank you and good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much, and we'll
Good
take
night.
care. Good night.
Good night.